Hi everyone, and welcome to Ask Christa, the place where you can ask questions about how to work through business challenges and workplace issues. I'm Christa Dhimo, and today's listener question is really a basic question. And when I read it, I thought, there's a great example of how the basics have been lost against the backdrop of so many business myths over the years, which has gotten me thinking that I should have a Shattering Old Business Myths series. Stay tuned for that. Here's the listener question. I work in a very large global organization. I started here 2 years after undergrad, and I've been here almost 15 years. I listened to your Ask Christa episode about organizational structure, and I realized for the first time in my adult life that I had never thought about how organizational structure can impact a company. I was surprised that I had never learned anything about that part of business, and my undergrad was in business. I'm now in operations. After that episode, I started to think about other business areas I feel I should know more about. Really basic things like, what do executives do? I don't mean that sarcastically either. I know those are big jobs with a lot of responsibility, but I have no idea what the day-to-day might look like. I suppose it changes based on role and style, and I'm sure it's different for different organizations. But if you could review what an executive does, it will help me fill in some gaps I didn't realize I had. And that's why I appreciate this listener question so much. My guess is there are a lot of others who have the same question. And while this seems like a business basics question, I didn't include it in that series because I'm not sure I'd consider it part of the basics of business. And here's what I mean. The listener is right that the role of an executive will change based on the objectives of a business, which if you've listened to other Ask Christa episodes, you know is a big theme in my world. Everything hinges on your objectives, and at least one objective must be about performance, and another objective must be about efficiency. And not the kind of efficiency you hear in the news, not the kind of efficiency you hear about from hobbyists who have never studied or implemented actual efficiency measures. I'm talking about efficiency where you're actually reducing waste. Anyone can simply hack away at costs. But true efficiency is like a never-ending Tetris game. And if you focus on being respectful of your employees' time, energy, and workload so that you can get the best from them each day, you'll find that those very employees whose time and energy you show respect for will be the ones to continually find ways to increase efficiency ongoing because they too don't want to waste their time or effort. And they certainly want to reduce workload, or at least know that the work they're doing is very specific and very aligned to achieving or exceeding goals. After all, efficiency means you have more capacity to build, develop, and then grow if you're doing it correctly. Your business won't need a big increase in additional costs and resources because you're reusing your resources or utilizing them differently. And because you have a tighter organizational effort, you're just reducing the costs associated to things that don't matter, things that don't produce value for your business. If you're being smart about the work and the workload, you'll find in many cases you can increase production by 10 to 30% without increasing costs and without overloading your employees. But I digress. Kind of. A big part of the executive's role is to keep an eye on how people are working, as well as whether the workload is appropriate for the results you're getting related to your goals. So back to the two key objectives, performance and efficiency. Again, the role of an executive starts with top-level accountability, making decisions and owning them, even if they prove to be suboptimal or just bad decisions. You still have to own them. Behaving with dignity and grace for mistakes while standing firm about expectations is also a key aspect of being an executive. Earning the trust and respect from your employees, taking responsibility for what goes wrong, and giving praise and recognition to those with a direct hand in what goes right. Being the person where the angst goes up to so that those doing the work can focus on the work and performance and efficiency. And someone else, the executive, manages the angst, the politics, and the challenges. In other words, the executive is the person removing the obstacles. Then there's the block and tackle of an organization. Along with the top line accountabilities come ownership of big ticket items, departmental budgets, or sometimes multiple budgets if multiple departments report into the executive, large scale hiring and expansion plans, escalation points for customers and vendors. The executive is the one people go to yell at. compliance points for laws, large-scale sign-offs on decisions that could have a material effect on a company. And by material, I mean the effect that could introduce a big risk. Executives are critical communicators about the state of the business, and they should have the ability to convey answers so as to keep the angst down to a minimum while offering the most accurate and forthcoming, honest answer for any question. They're also the ones who often need to deliver bad news about a failure and then openly, honestly, and in a trustworthy manner enable the employees to process the news, take some time to work through it, and within a reasonable amount of time get back to work with any additional resources necessary to support. And of course, there are some key traits to executives too. The top two being impulse control and emotional regulation. I've seen a lot of executives. Today they're peers, but early in my career, there were a few levels up. And then of course my managers had a hard time keeping from overreacting, feeling defensive, emoting in the moment, conveying information properly, but in a way that created angst in the room. And of course, keeping a handle on their stress and temperaments. So if they have talking points and they're conveying the information properly because of the talking points, they're doing so in a way where people can listen and manage their own emotions without worrying about how they're responding to the person providing the news. But I saw a lot of great executives in action, the kind of executives who feel like they're rowing the boat with the rest of us, the kind where you can go to them and you know that they're going to listen and they're going to make some changes to the extent they can make changes, and they're going to let you know about it also. There was an excellent TEDx segment a year ago that talked about how we don't hear about the best leaders because they're quieter. They're not as difficult. They're not as awkward. They're not as toxic. And they're not always in the news. We're not always hearing about the enormous pay disparity or the employee walkouts or some of the more elevated issues we often see and hear about on the day-to-day. When an organization places emphasis on executive selection and ongoing development based on their traits as a leader, as well as their experience and depth of understanding the business that they're in, the company runs smoother. Employees, for the most part, also enjoy working there. They feel engaged, committed to success. They understand how the work they're doing matters. Sound like a dream come true? That might be about your manager or someone managing work closer to you, or it could be because of the executives. But the bottom line is, we can usually get past or manage a bad boss or someone we work with very closely. We know our time with that boss is probably limited, or that person on the team won't be someone you work with forever, either because we can find a way to move on or we know they will. But an executive, it's hard to get past an executive who displays bad behavior or makes bad decisions. And it's even harder to leave an organization when the executives we see are those we'd want to work with at any time in any company, the ones who display good behavior and make good decisions. Leadership style matters all the time, but especially with those at an executive level. Larger companies, like the one this listener is in, they often identify high potential employees early on or make note of those interested in leadership roles. And they offer management training and an optional track for leadership development to an eventual executive role. But small and mid-sized companies, as I've discussed in other episodes, they often neglect to train their managers right from the start. And neglecting any training for your managers often means neglecting any training for the whole chain of managers, all the way up to executives. Maybe you'll be able to hire executives in from other companies that trained their managers and their executives. But if they're the minority executive who's properly trained and they do not receive ongoing checks and skill updates in the smaller and mid-sized companies, their management and leadership skills will erode. Effective leadership is a competitive value for an organization, especially the smaller and mid-sized ones that may not have the resources to fill in talent gaps the way larger organizations do. And when someone becomes a manager and has no training or insufficient training right from the start, then they work their way up. Well, we've all been there. We've all seen or worked with executives like that. Ugh, no thank you. That won't elevate organizational performance. So, the day-to-day. They're there to support, enable execution of the strategy, which they have or should have weighed in on and contributed to on behalf of their departments. And yes, I know, this doesn't always happen. I've facilitated enough strategic planning discussions to know there might be a few people in the room who aren't prepared. And by the way, early in my career, I was in the groups where my executives were signing us up for things we had no business being signed up for. But I'm letting you know how high-performing companies operate, and there are companies that do it the right way. The day-to-day for an executive will change based on the size of the organization and the function the executive is leading, but enabling the execution of strategy most times means making sure your people have the tools and resources available and continue to learn and develop appropriately to do their best and meet or exceed their goals and the company's objectives. It really is that straightforward. So if you're in marketing, you're an executive in marketing, you're talking about predictions, market signals, forecasting, or how many sales you're expecting, anything that might soften or speed up the market. You're talking about competitors. And then you're asking, what else do I need to do in service to my group? If you're in sales, you'll be focused on prospective and customer relationships, ways to enhance the funnel and pipeline. You're going to be talking about customer problems, and some of those will be escalated to you. And then you're the ones who have to have the difficult and uncomfortable calls with the customers. You'll be the one that your district managers or regional managers go to discuss innovative and creative ways to close on important clients when motivating your entire department to value your prospects and clients over all else. A sales culture that puts high worth in relationships alongside ambitious people looking to close a contract and cultivate that relationship ongoing is where a lot of sales executive time goes. And of course, asking the question, now what else can I do in service to my team? If you're in manufacturing and quality for a product, or implementation or testing for software or something that requires implementation and testing, you'll be focused on ways to be efficient with how you create and build and release your products. You'll also be closely aligned to marketing to understand forecasts so you can plan your team's work to supply to customers based on the expected demand. There's often an element of compliance too, and of course, you then ask, what else can I do in service to my team? If you're running a G&A function outside of sales and marketing, such as HR or legal or corporate communications or finance and investor relations, you'll be focused on enabling everyone across the organization to leverage your resources, your team, your department, and work as effectively and efficiently as possible with the full support of your team and the expertise your team is providing to them. And then, of course, what else can I do in service to my team? And for executives, your team is everyone who reports up into you. I'll put additional information in the show notes to learn about various roles and responsibilities of the executives. Now that you have a bit of insight, I want to ask you to drop any preconceived notion you have about how bad executives are and reframe who you are as an employee instead. We all know there are bad apples everywhere. But executives are out in the open for everyone to see, and that's actually part of their role as a top leader too. And I get how hard it can be to feel like things aren't happening to you, especially if you have an ineffective executive. How bad decisions are made at the top, and by the time it gets down to you, you say, we can't do any of this. We aren't structured this way, or we aren't funded to do all that work, or we don't have people on the team who can do that. So I get it, and I'll say it. In a general sense, executives have earned the reputation as people who are out of touch and make bad decisions. Yes, but that's not always true. Now, if it's true for you, one of the ways to counter that is to determine your expectations of an executive. Take notes about who they are, how they behave, what they do, and whether you feel motivated to give your best for that day. And then you make some decisions. Some of the questions to ask is, what will you insist on? What does your have to see and know in order to feel respect for your executive? What behaviors do you want to see versus what you actually see? What would make things better for you? And is this someone you can trust? The point of asking these questions isn't to convince yourself to like or dislike your executive. The point is to create a standard you expect from your executive, followed by expectations you have, because you should have them. But Christa, no one cares what I do with those standards. Why should I even bother with this? Well, craft good feedback, and then offer it to them. Okay, I know. Most people can't do that, but do you have a suggestion box at work? Do you have a mechanism to provide ideas for improvement? Do you have a forum where you can offer behaviorally based inputs, describe the impact of that behavior, and then ask for some change or something different? And ask for a skip level meeting or suggest skip level meetings where you and your team can have a monthly meeting with your top line executive. So you can meet him or her, learn about them, see them as a person, ask questions. Your top line executive will gain the same benefit. Oftentimes there's a resentment with employees and their top line executives because he or she seems so far away. And again, seems out of touch. That is the number one complaint I hear from employees when I am working alongside them to figure out how to improve an organization. And for real, sometimes they are out of touch. But a lot of times, they're taking care of big items during a very long workday, putting out fires at their level because of external forces or even internal forces. Funding, board issues, peer issues, and land grabs, the politics, including these days, federal politics, global dynamics, cranky customers, regulators. Executive jobs are big jobs. And if they're really good executives, which means they're effective leaders, their day-to-day is mostly made up of what they need to do to enable their department's success, removing obstacles and clearing the way so that you can get done what needs to get done. You can purchase what's needed, you can get the time from others that you need, you can hold fellow employees accountable without issues, you can work in a culture and environment where you feel you can do your best. For your resources, I've included an article that describes what executives do. It's from Indeed UK. I've also included an article that's similar, but also reviews some of the titles from Indeed USA. I wanted to offer resources that might provide career advice and insight rather than just the usual type of resource I provide. And look up executive roles on job boards. It's one of the best ways to get a sense of executive level expectations. And again, remember, create your expectations and understand what you expect. I've also included an article from ZipRecruiter about how to become an executive. As someone who worked at an executive level for years and now advise them in a variety of ways, I appreciated this article very much. And you'll find the TEDx Berlin talk from Martin Gutmann titled, "Why Do We Celebrate Incompetent Leaders?" It's from May 2024 and has over 1 million views, and it's the one I talked about a few minutes ago. And that's a wrap. Episode 34. We have just 2 more episodes of this season, and both are still related to working in a business, but more about the how-tos. One is about having better meetings, and the other is about better presentation skills. And remember, I'm not giving you answers that you can easily find with a Google search or on YouTube or on some training session. I'm giving answers aimed to make an impact, sharing information and perspective that you can not only use in a variety of ways, but also where you can't get anywhere else. So keep the questions coming. Go to my show's website, askchrista.com. That's Christa with a CH, where you can listen to the audio version of my show and watch the video version too. And of course, my newsletter, More Answers. It's sent out every Sunday night to set you up for the work week. Thank you, as always, for your support. And remember, if you have a business challenge or workplace issue, ask Christa.